Well, the whole situation in Ferguson has now had a couple of days to sink into everyone, meaning everybody has a chance to better grasp what's going on now that the initial anger, the initial reaction is gone. Now what's left is less of an emotion-fueled reaction and more, hopefully, an attempt to look at things from an analytical perspective. Unfortunately, the media has completely and utterly failed to do that. The one thing that strikes me the most is the anger towards people looting. I understand that they're angry, but there's no need for the looting. Or, as the usual white liberal stance of, you don't need to loot. I mean, it's just not necessary. Focus your anger on where it should be. And I say, where is that? Where is it supposed to be? They say, stop being angry. Start showing peace. Be like Martin Luther King. It's especially hilarious when white people try to invoke the image of Martin Luther King and his stoic self-control and his passion where he wasn't violent right before they shot him in the face. It never ceases to amaze me how white liberals can continually advocate, just relax, calm down, think this through. The system will work. And that is essentially what anyone who is saying, don't riot, don't loot. That's exactly what they're saying. They're saying the system works, that there's a peaceful resolution to this, that there's something in the system that they can go through that would actually work. But that system that they very well know doesn't work, that already has to be changed, because they're already arguing that it needs to be changed. But then they're turning around and saying, don't riot, do that. That's usually the white people way of saying, well, don't actually risk the society. I mean, it's very easy to say, don't use violence, don't loot, when, well, you're not the one getting shot at. So it's very easy to stand here and advocate the non-violence when, well, you're not the one getting killed by police. But if you're already recognizing that the legal system doesn't work, which it clearly just demonstrated that it doesn't, why would you then turn around and rely on that same legal system? That doesn't make any sense. And at times like these, when people rise up and they cause destruction like this, they destroy things, regardless of what it is that they're destroying. And then people come out and they complain about this. I'm reminded of the old expression by Mao. The emperor can burn down villages, but the people are forbidden from lighting even a single candle. And isn't that exactly what we've seen? We've seen police officer after police officer kill hundreds of, if we consider the entire time, thousands of young black men, and nothing happens. Or rarely anything even happens. But if the people in Ferguson riot, they just destroy stuff, or they injure a couple of cops, then that's too far. That's wrong. It's going too far. Oh, once again, the police are allowed to kill all these people and have nothing happen to it, nothing challenges the system, and no difference is made. The emperor is burning down villages. But the people uprise once, smash a couple of things, don't even kill anybody, and they're not even allowed to light that one single candle. And that's very much the anti-revolutionary mentality. That's also the very racist mentality as well. But I'm going to get into that in a minute. Do you ever notice how a lot of this has the really white colonizer mentality to it? We take the example that I'm sure we've all seen on Facebook countless times of when white people have rioted because a sports team won and they've done untold damage. And those guys are just clowning around, or they're just excited, they're just jubilant. They're just clowns, ruffians. But when black people riot over a legitimate, massive, ongoing injustice, they're thugs, they're demons, they're these awful, scary hordes of black people. Do you ever notice that? And it's not just limited to this concept of just white and black. This happens on an international scale as well. This is a global and also imperialist type mindset. Look at the people. Look at the United States invade Iraq and Afghanistan. These two countries which are not responsible for the things that they claim that they're responsible for, particularly with regards to Iraq. Then after the professional army of Iraq runs away, or is defeated, people step in and take their place. and they IED bomb the United States. And they rocket attacks and whatnot. And they're just terrorists. Because nobody could legitimately not want the U.S. Army occupying their country. I mean, that's an entirely foreign concept to them. They literally cannot get it through their heads that people don't want to be occupied by the U.S. military. So they must be terrorists. And that's what the media portrays them. It's never the righteous, legitimate anger of the people against being occupied. It's always just some terrorists, some troublemakers, those who would benefit if Iraq was destabilized and fell apart. The people who basically mercenaries leading a bunch of tribals who overthrew the government of Gaddafi, well, entirely on the NATO dollar and with the NATO bombings and whatnot. Those were legitimate acts of anger against an oppressive, evil tyrant. Many of those acts turned out actually to not be true. In fact, it was just an imperialist ploy the entire time to overthrow a legitimate government. But when they get angry at the fact that they've had their country overthrown from the outside by essentially foreign forces coming in to do it for them, and then they go and they kill the U.S. ambassador and the whole Benghazi Gate thing happens, it's troublemakers, it's just terrorists. Because again, we are the United States of America, we are the imperialist power, representatives of NATO to some degree. Nobody could not want us there. It must be a bunch of troublemakers. It must be a bunch of evil terrorists that don't want us there. Because of course, when the emperor comes in, bombs a country, kills hundreds of thousands of people, or in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan combined, about 3 million people, the emperor burns down the villages, or bombs an entire country to the ground. But if someone dare roadside bomb like a U.S. convoy, they light a candle, and that's going too far. What we see in Ferguson today with the liberal white outrage or conservative, but particularly with regards to liberals because they don't support what it is that was done to Michael Brown. But somehow they just keep continuing to support the system that doesn't. That's the same thing that's going on in Ferguson right now and the many other cities around the country that are protesting right now. The emperor is allowed to burn down the villages, kill scores of black people, arrest them constantly for virtually non-existent things, oppress the hell out of them, conduct random searches on them, with the stop and frisk thing. But if the people dare light a single candle, even by just protesting, they're not allowed. The United States government, whether that be the police or the imperialist power structure, or just the racist mentality of white America, they are the emperor. Even white people are getting mad because black people lit a single candle. Again, another thing that popped up with this whole situation with Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, the same kind of thing that popped up with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, is the idea of this superhuman, superpowered black man. Now this has its racist roots going back to college football and whatnot, the idea that because only really strong slaves were bred with each other, kind of form of eugenics, that's why they're such better athletes and stuff like that, and that justifies a lot of the racist perceptions. Look at it, look how it's really looked at. He was beaten savagely by this Hulk kid. It felt like I was a child in Hulk Hogan's hands or something like that. Both Michael Brown and Darren Wilson were about the same size. In fact, there was very little size difference between the two of them. Oh, well, one of them had a gun as well, but, what's that really matter? And of course, we can go into the whole thing now. This savage beating was essentially actually nothing. Little more than a minor abrasion, which could have been easily confused for rosacea and prescribed over-the-counter Tylenol for. But this is always a constant theme. The Trayvon Martin was this savage that just attacked George Zimmerman out of nowhere. for no reason other than other than the fact that he was stalking him. That Trayvon Martin had these MMA type moves, and that's what allowed him to beat the much bigger Zimmerman. So even when the guy's bigger, like in the case of Zimmerman, it's still some kind of savage beast mentality, that there's some kind of roving evil threat. And it, of course, has its roots back at the end of slavery and whatnot. Oh, well, if we just end slavery, they're going to run around killing people and murdering all the former white masses and masters, stuff like that. All of which never happened. And then made it out to be like this big, roving, evil pack of savages, and a lot of really colorful language used to describe that. And which, of course, never actually took place. But we see that as very alive still today. Those with the least amount of power in society, next to Native Americans, who can wield the least amount of control and power in society, are portrayed as the absolute biggest threat. Those on top, with the greatest power possible, with the highest offices in the country, actually, let me take that back, all the offices in the country, are the poor, innocent victims. It's these horrible, evil masses who have no power in society, who are bad. Not the police officers, who have basically the entire bureaucratic apparatus of the country protecting them. And we're going to go into that in another video. Not those people who wield power in society. Not those who actually exercise all the power that there is with the U.S. government. No. The real power, the real danger, comes from the regular, everyday oppressed people. It's never the people with power that are the threat or the cause of danger. It's always those with little power, or none at all. Whether that be the people on the ground in Ferguson, or that be the people on the ground in Iraq. What about cop killers and killer cops? Now, this was another great point that was brought up. Look at what happens when a cop kills somebody. The greatest of protection. Nobody really does anything. And it's damned near impossible to get a conviction or even a grand jury decision on it. But yet, if somebody kills a cop, like, say, Chris Dorner, or any other number of the people who have just said, that was it, I'm not tolerating this anymore, I'm going to go out and I'm going to, they decided that they were going to go kill cops. When those people do it, these become massive manhunts, where no expense is spared in trying to track these guys down and bring them to quote-unquote justice. But look at all the scores of people who've been killed by the police, who very, very rarely even get a second thought. But if somebody dares do that to the police, well, it's a national emergency. But look how many people it took to track down Chris Dorner. It took an incredible amount of people. You think that would ever be used on someone who just killed somebody else? You think that would ever be used on a cop who just killed somebody? Of course not. And then have these white liberal types sit there and say, oh, don't loot, don't riot, because the system will take care of that. There's the whole bureaucratic legal process that will totally help you, which already isn't working to begin with, which is why we have riots. But that's another point that I wanted to make. A cop kills people, nothing. That's everyday work. But if somebody kills a cop, well, that's a massive manhunt. That's a nationwide emergency. That we must bring this guy to justice, and we will spare no expense in doing so. A little bit of a double standard there, don't you think? And while we're on the subject of race, in Clayton, in about, I think it was July this year, a black police officer was charged because he hit a white MetroPass, the public transit, hit a white passenger with a baton. So you're telling me this guy hits, a black cop hits a white passenger, gets charged. This white cop kills a black kid. Nothing. Really. And that shows an absolute double standard, and makes me really wonder, like, looking at black cops, like, how do you really justify being a cop when this is what they'll do to you? I mean, you clearly don't care what they'll actually do to black people in general. But look at what this one guy will, look what they'll do to you personally as a police officer. Yes, I know Clayton is not Ferguson, and this is by no means an isolated incident. But it is symptomatic of the prejudice that exists even within the police. And despite any statement made by Obama a couple days ago how the police aren't racist. Here's the double standard on race, even within police departments themselves. When things like this happen and the white liberals go out, that's the ones I particularly have a problem with, because they're the ones that claim they care when they really don't. They always talk about a lack of tolerance that leads to this situation. The police need to be more tolerant of the black population. The protesters need to be more tolerant of the police, and this is all about a lack of tolerance and understanding. Never does it ever occur to them that there might be a systemic, long-standing issue, that this might be systematic. There might actually be something repressive about the system itself. It's always some kind of perceived injustice that just happens. Well, no police system is perfect, which is really nothing more than a justification for the things that it does. But it's beyond their comprehension that this could actually just be a problematic system, that this system creates these inequalities. It's never a question about inequality. It's never a question about what it is that the system does, like how it's set up, how it's structured, what it structurally does. It's always some kind of aberrant behavior to them. It's always some kind of, oh, this is just one bad apple. Because remember, it's always one bad apple. It's never the other way around when it's protesters. It's always just this bad apple. But no, when it's the masses, they're all evil, scary animals. Think about that. Now one thing I am sick to death of hearing is Cornel West talking in situations like this. Now you know who Cornel West is. Black academic, he's been arrested, what have you. This guy championed his ass off for Obama. I mean, he did everything he could to try to get this guy elected. And now he goes out saying that Obama has abandoned the black population. That he doesn't care about black people. Of course he doesn't. But how can a man so smart not get it through his head? He really believes that it's just race. That the cops are just racist. The former presidents, they were just racist. It's never something systemic within the system itself. And then when a black president got elected, because he thought, well, if a black man gets elected president, this kind of stuff is going to stop, because he won't tolerate it because he's black. And then it continues. And in fact, a lot of statistics show that African Americans are even worse off under Obama than they were during Bush. And yet he stands here saying like how, oh, this Obama's abandoned us and everything. He was never on your side. To even think that he was ever on your side demonstrates that Cornel West does not understand the structure of society. Because if you think you can just change the head and then the whole system will change, you clearly don't understand what the system is and clearly do not understand how it works. Another thing that gets overlooked is the whole class aspect to this. People don't understand the class reality of the police. The police are there to serve and protect the capitalist class, the property-owning class, those who own the means of production. But they present it in a particular narrative which allows them to continue doing that. For example, whenever things happen like this, a lot of white people, conservative or liberal or ironically enough, libertarian, run out and they say how the police are just doing their jobs, or this is why we need police because of things like this. And, you know, we're glad the police are here to take care of problems like this. Because you notice it's always like the thing where in their reasoning it's protecting them from black masses. That's always the racial connotation that's put with it, even by liberals. But they never realize the actual class structure of the police themselves. They're there to repress you too. It's one of those situations where white people are less attacked by the police a lot less attacked by the police than African Americans. So therefore, by that reasoning, the police are there to protect white people. And thus, from that, they get the support from white people, who all have their own complaints about the police. But those complaints just suddenly disappear when you get an uprising like this, or you get a riot like this, or whatever particular word you'd would like to use for it. That particular class aspect of the police suddenly gets forgotten. And people who are not class conscious do the same thing. You know, I hate the police because I have to pay a parking ticket, or I had to speed. What the F? All of a sudden, that all gets forgotten when there's an uprising like this. When black people get mad and they riot, all of a sudden they're glad the cops are there. And all of a sudden they're on the cops' side. Here's another good one. Take the example of the Bundy Ranch thing. Here were white people with guns threatening to kill the cops, directly intending to overthrow the government. They even called for that to happen. They literally called for a revolution to happen. Nothing happened to these people. Were any of them shot dead? Ones who were actually taking guns and aiming them right at the friggin' cops, threatening them, yelling threats. Any of them get shot? No. But somehow some black kid running away, who has his hands up, unarmed, gets killed. Somebody like to explain that one to me? Well, yeah, because he's black. But the media jumps on all this too. They're just patriots who are concerned for their country. Well, actually, it was a millionaire who just didn't want to pay his taxes. But look at this in the eyes of these white people, both liberal and conservative. This guy is outraged that he had to pay taxes for land that he didn't own. Meaning he was using that and not having to pay. And then he owes all these back taxes. And that's too far. We need to have a revolution in this country, and we need to come from all over to protect this guy from having to pay his taxes. But if there's a systemic killing of black people, then their anger is not justified. Then they're just thugs and looters looking for an excuse to trash the place. Because, of course, nobody could actually really care, right? I mean, I love listening to white people, particularly liberal white people, and even conservative white people too, complain about the looting. They're stealing. Says the people who live in a country that was literally stolen by other people and built up by the slave labor of other people. Honest to God, who are you even kidding with that? And again, I could go into a whole thing about property ownership and private property about this. I mean, Bundy Ranch guys arguing over what he owns, or what he has to pay money on, what he does or doesn't owe, depending on the situation. And the people of Ferguson are getting killed in their own city. And the totally different treatment. Do the police come in and start killing people when there's a riot of white people really excited because a sports team won? Nowhere. There's no comparison between that and the police response in Ferguson. Absolutely none. Militarized police, yes. Same response? Absolutely not. And in this situation, when leftists or so-called communists are whining about there being riots and whining about there being looting, I say to you the same thing that Mao said when the peasants were doing the same thing. It's fine. The present upsurge of the peasant movement is a colossal event. In a very short time, in China's central, southern, and northern provinces, several 100 million peasants will rise like a mighty storm, like a hurricane, a force so swift and violent that no power, however great, will be able to hold it back. They will smash all the trammels that bind them and rush forward along the road to liberation. They will sweep all the imperialists, warlords, corrupt officials, local tyrants, and evil gentry into their graves. Countless thousands of the enslaved, the peasants, are striking down the enemies who have battened on their flesh. What the peasants are doing is absolutely right. What they are doing is fine. It's fine. It's the theory of the peasants and all of other revolutionaries.